do is go do a quick test drive on the highway. Tape up some of this where we think the air leaks are coming and see if it helps on the wind noise and on the efficiency of the air conditioning, so we kind of know where we need to add some weather stripping in the door jamb. This will give us that going on. Yeah, this will give us the idea of where the bulk wind leak is coming from. If it's going to work in this area, we've done this way before. There's plenty of weather stripping on the door, the factory style weather stripping, but it's not getting a good seal. So some of these trucks, these old cars, the doors just never fit good to start with. So we'll get this out on the highway up at speed, and we'll get a good indication of how efficient this will help in the AC and on the wind noise. So as you can see, it's not even getting down to 60 degrees with the doors taped up, so we still got some heat coming in from the floorboards and probably around the lower portion of the door where we can't tape it up. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the old paper trick. We'll take a sheet of paper, stick it around the door with the shut, and see where we can pull it through. And if it's tight, airtight, it won't pull. If it's not, it'll pull out. And then those are the areas of the weather stripping that we really need to address. When you get these old trucks or old cars, especially when they were already built, the weather strip's been pre-installed, you're kind of limited as to what you can and can't do. They don't make thick, thin, or medium weather stripping. It's just one thickness. And you also have to consider the door gaps and alignment on the doors when you're fitting all that and adjusting it. So we get back to the shop, we'll see what we got going on with that, and we'll make a decision from there. You can see here there's the weather stripping's not touching at all there, not touching there, barely there, there we got a somewhat decent seal. Better there. Got a good one there. So that's where some of our wind leaks and wind noises are coming from, mostly air leaks. And then let's see what we got going down here. Not much. There's a good seal. Not bad there. Hardly anything there. Looks like we need to tighten up this door handle a little bit too. Yeah, so we just got a good gap all the way around. And that's where this aftermarket weather strip just isn't sealing good around the door. So it's coming glued there. So we got a few little issues to address. We're going to try some temporary additional here around the cab to just take up some of that gap. It'll make it a little bit more difficult to actually close, but we'll do that and see where that gets us. 55 truck, checking our new weather stripping out that we put on the doors. It has cut the noise down considerably and the air leak considerably, but our AC case is still sweating a little bit, so that means that we're still receiving some warm outside air to the inside of the truck. That's what's going to cause that condensation. So what we're going to do when we get back, we'll research a little bit more. We could be getting some more warm air in around the shifter, because you got to remember there's a hole through the floor, and then the shifter comes up through that because it's mounted to the transmission. So that is one of the things that you always want to make sure is little things like that will affect the efficiency of the AC. The inside of the truck feels considerably cooler than it did the other day, and our duct temperature is down below 60 now. Not a lot, but it was about 65, close to 70 before, 68, somewhere in there, best I remember. So we're still getting a little bit of outside air in, but not near what we did. So we're going to put a few more miles on it and then head back to the shop, and we'll look it over. The floorboards, they're not getting warm. It's not actually warm. The shifter handle's not hot. So, you know, we may not have a leak there, wind leak, but we're still getting some outside air in to create that condensation. Plus, we also have to remember that this is a 10 or 12-year-old AC system, so that will affect a little bit of the ability to cool, just because of the technology from 10 or 12 years ago, the coil design that they were using in the heater coil combination design. So, but I think we can still get a little bit cooler air out of it. So we're going to put a few more miles on it, and we're running 65 and 70 on these state highways, back roads here outside of our Dallas area. Car still rides nice. Customer came out and saw it this past Saturday. Very happy. Excited to get the truck back. We're excited for him to get it back. So stay tuned, and we'll see what we can determine when we get back to the shop. So one of the things we've noticed, we turned the air conditioner off just to see what engine temperature is going to do, how, if it's going to drop, how much, you know, the AC is affecting that. But with this stop and go traffic that we're into right here because of some road construction, and with the windows down, I reached down and grabbed a hold of the shift lever, and it was pretty hot. So we grabbed our thermometer, and if you'll notice here, it's reading well over 100, what does that say, 120, close to 120 degrees. So those are the things that you have to think about when you're dealing with the efficiency of your air conditioning. Is that's some of the stuff that the AC is fighting against, trying to keep cool. So we're going to pull this console loose and see what's inside the console, and how to possibly cut off some of the air leaks, engine road heat coming up through the floor, because it's got to obviously have a pretty large hole around that shifter, or no boot sealing the shifter to the floor. And the only boot they're relying on is the one that's the upholstery boot for the console. So when you get into that, you know, firewall, insulate that firewall as much as possible. Sound deadening, the hush mat and the dynamat and those items, those are exactly what they're called, sound deadeners, not insulators. So you still need to put insulation under your carpet on top of the sound deadening, and that's what's going to greatly improve the efficiency of the air conditioning. So we've rolled the windows up, turned the air back on, but as you saw, the thermometer holding it to the shifter was in the neighborhood of 120 degrees of that metal temperature. The actual cabin temperature was in the 90s with the windows down, and we have approximately 80 degrees of ambient air temperature right at the moment. It's still 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning. But one of the things I've also noticed is the electric fans are on with the air on. This is a fuel-injected vehicle, so we have an electric fuel pump. We have an ECU. And with all of those items pulling current, one of the things, too, is you need to make sure that you have a very high-quality alternator. And in today's hot rod world, with the fuel injection, the LS motors, Coyote motors, and the electrical demands, a 100-amp alternator is not going to cut it anymore. 120 is a minimum nowadays, and you need to make sure that those alternators are grounded good. The cases need to be grounded besides their mounting points through the bracketry system, because it's an aluminum alternator. Usually it's going to be mounted to an aluminum bracket or to an aluminum headed engine. So ground wires, ground cables are very important. That helps take some of the task or the load off of the charging system. It's not having to work so hard. But most of these systems that we're putting together now, we're running at least 150 amp alternator. And then you also need to the charge wire for that alternator. A 10 gauge wire, 8 gauge wire is not going to cut it anymore. We're a dealer for American Auto Wire, and if I'm not mistaken, the size wire that comes in a lot of their kits is at least a 6 gauge, maybe a 4 gauge. I know the Vintage Air stuff, when you buy one of their front runner systems with a high amp alternator, it comes with a 4 gauge wire. You need to have plenty of capacity for the demand that's being put on it, and then route those wires, research it and route the wiring correctly. Every person's car is going to be a little different of how they route it, but you need to make sure that it goes in some way as direct to the battery as possible. The same with the ground wires. We run our ground cable all the way to the starter bolt, not to the frame. Steel is a poor conductor of current. It has a lot of amperage drop per foot versus the copper cable. So those are things that really need to be paid attention to when you're doing this. And that helps the efficiency of your charging system, helps the efficiency of all the components that are being ran by that charging system. Make sure you have a large enough battery capacity so that you're not just overtaxing that alternator all the time. The alternator's job is to replenish the battery, not to operate the components on the car. Granted, if your battery goes bad, starts going bad, you want an alternator that's capable of at least getting you home. So we'll as videos go and we run into situations on other cars, we'll start addressing more of those, show you some of the how-to stuff that we do, some of our experiences that we've ran into with a lot of that. Here in Texas, we have that. That's a major issue, is the heat. Granted, Arizona and New Mexico, they have the same issues also, but a lot of people just don't think about it. So anyway, we're going to get back to the shop, see if we can find a few more wind leaks. It's already dropped our AC temperature down. We're back down to below 60 now. It was until I touched it. But so it's working. The system's working. It's doing its job. It's cooling the car off. But I think we can get it a little bit colder in here. We're also dealing with driving on asphalt, which absorbs heat. But this truck's going to be very nice to drive and ride around in. It handles good. It's got plenty of power for what the motor is. It's a LS3. I believe it was a crate motor when it was built. So anyway, we'll be back to the shop here in about 20-30 minutes, and then we'll go over some stuff on the truck.